Mitzi VanSant knew just what she was looking for when she returned to Texas. In Smithville, she found it, an arts and crafts bungalow built in 1929 on a double-wide lot that just begged her to turn it into a garden.
When I got here, I found out about the soil, and the soil is to die for. There's about 3 feet of sandy loam over red clay. You can dig in it with a teaspoon. It grows anything. I always think about that when I buy a house.
That's not unusual, since after years as a pediatric nurse, she turned her weekend garden passion into a design career. In 1997, she graduated from UC Berkeley's landscape architecture program. When Mitzi returned to Texas in 2004, she found her dream house and restored it to its roots.
Then I started on the art. There were a few shrubs, one of each kind of something or other around the edge. They were overgrown. There was no screening from them. I left them for the first year. The first year, I dug a vegetable garden, and I sat and I looked at the sunshade issues, and I got a feeling for the soil, and I thought about what I wanted to do, and I didn't really start the garden, laying out the garden, until I'd been here more than a year. I wanted to make a garden that went with the period of the house. In the arts and crafts period, kind of in the United States, it might have been a really informal sort of garden in terms of layout. What I chose to do was English arts and crafts, which has a very formal layout to it, a lot of rectilinear corners.
Mitzi divided the large space into rooms that connect to one another on formal access definitions. Although she reduced the lawn, she's left some for croquet and running around room with her grandchildren. She also hosts community events and political rallies where there's room for hundreds of folks with lawn chairs. From the beginning, she planned a garden for future grandchildren.
I call it the baby garden, but it's a children's garden, and it has a sandbox, and it has a big concrete bowl for water play, and a little statue of St. Francis, like an infant St. Francis.
Mitzi wanted to create memories for them like her grandparents did for her.
My grandparents lived in Nebraska. We used to go see them about every 3 years on the train from Washington State, where I grew up, and there was a sandbox in actually it was my great-grandmother's garden, and it was enclosed by a lilac hedge, and you had to be a little person to get in there. There wasn't really an opening, you crawled underneath, and I've always remembered that. We would always go in June and the lilacs would be blooming and stuff, and so I think that's the fragrance and its association with things from the memories in the past, and so that's one thing I did here in my garden.
Mitzi encloses the baby garden with spring-blooming fragrant vines, sweet olive, and viburnums. Her grandchildren find their fragrant secret cubbyhole under the shrubby winter-flowering honeysuckle. Since fragrance is such a powerful sensory memory, Mitzi perfumes every avenue. From her days with the Texas rose wrestlers who find and propagate heritage roses, she discovered that roses don't have to be a trauma. In her garden now, she includes old and modern, but only those as tough as the pioneers. In this late spring visit, old-fashioned garden perennials mingle with native plants.
A lot of the plants that are in this garden go with a house of that period, So I have modern cultivars of old-fashioned things in this garden, but most of the stuff that is in this garden is pretty old-fashioned.
In cool weather, annuals attract overwintering resident beneficial insects. In hot weather, Mitzi simply changes the menu.
I use a lot of pentas as an annual flower because it draws butterflies. People in town know about this garden and they come by here a lot, and I like color, but they also like color, so every year I do a lot of annuals, usually at the front of the beds in front of the other shrubs and roses. Things change. Some years I do one thing and the next year I'll try something different.
In her new home, the first gardens she laid out were for seasonal vegetables, now bordered by perennials and rose arbors.
It looks pretty all year round. When I have extras, I take them to the food pantry here in town, and they're very appreciative of that.
Along with views outside, Mitzi especially planned views from indoors. She also connects the spaces architecturally, like arbors that mimic the roofline.
Something that you can do that really makes a garden tie in with a house is look for significant architectural features on the house. And it's just a little tiny thing in the big picture of it, but I shaped the pickets on the fence to mimic the roof lines on this house. Well, I've been in this house 6 years, and it's taken me, that long to come to the place where it is now. And I change a few things like gardeners do. Something doesn't work out and I get something new and try something different. So it's not completely, it's not fully grown yet, but I feel like it is finally coming into its own. You have to be patient if you're a gardener, as you well know.